23rd of November, the day before Thanksgiving, a fine holiday, a great American holiday, and I'm here with a great American, Don Anderson, and regular Wednesday co-host. Don, how are you?
Doing fantastic. Thanks so much for that great intro. And I just came off of a knee replacement surgery, so I missed last week. So I've gotten over the drugs. So if I drool on a little bit here, I just want to give you that excuse right off the bat. You know,
It's okay. You would. There's plenty of reasons to drool on, so I wouldn't even attribute it to the knee. There's just so many things happening in our world that just make you think, ah. you know
yes.
so uh and we're going to start out with one of them. um you know so in Eugene, which had some good news yesterday because um the citizens responded and fought back vociferously against the city council's diabolical plan to put into place a natural gas ban in new homes and building and office buildings under
Right.
3 stories. And it's insane, literally what they're doing. But people are fighting back. And I got a little smudge here. Better clean that up, or otherwise I won't. I need to be able to see it, Don.
Yeah. There you
Um,
go.
and so what's interesting is within the same week, some really crazy news erupted, which is that the Eugene, let me see here, it was the 4J. Um, I'm going to just bring it up on my screen so I can read what it says. It's the 4J school board in Eugene. And if you start watching this, I mean, you can watch the whole thing. It's only 7 minutes and 30 seconds. But if you start watching it at the 2 minute and 55-second mark, all of a sudden something happens that is just like mind-blowingly crazy. And I recommend everybody take the time to go watch it, because what you're going to find is somebody is actually using accusations of other people on the school board of being racist and white supremacist to basically talk over everyone and try to have everyone, including the person who's chairing the meeting, ruled out of order for simply ask a question. And she tried to shut him down and then talk over everyone, and they adjourned the meeting because there was just no way to proceed with the meeting. And so I'm putting the link here, and I recommend everybody take the time to watch it because this is the kind of stuff that's happening right now in with our government in places that you just wouldn't think um, would be run with such a lack of not only decorum but just utilizing uh, pejoratives to just run roughshod over people who are simply trying to ask a question about a piece of business that is supposed to be handled. And this person just starts talking over everybody and shouting. Even the person who she demands take control of the meeting, she won't let her have control of the meeting. And every time she made a point of order and then didn't do anything with the point, didn't ask for the chair to do anything with the point of order, just demanded that the other person be silenced. And then when the chair didn't agree with the ruling uh, on the point of order, she demanded that she appealed it to the entire board. And then when the chair tried to take a vote of the entire board, she kept talking. And it's not a point that's debatable. That's something called Robert's Rules that is used to govern these discussions. And there's no debate. And she just kept talking and talking and talking and accusing everyone of white supremacy. And this is really concerning that this kind of thing is happening, that people are actually elected to an office and then decide they're going to just dominate a governmental entity, and accuse everyone else on it uh, of white supremacy. And what else did she say? She said, "You're bullying a black person because they're
Yes.
black,
Yeah.
right?" So what
Yeah,
are your thoughts on this? Because you got to just listen to it just now along with me, and
yeah.
this is crazy.
I'm gonna try to organize my thoughts because it's hard to like keep track of all the things I'd want to say. But I'd say first thing that I observe is that these bullies, these radical left bullies, are basically weaponizing their race to silence white people or to silence anyone else that they disagree with. And
Anyone. Yeah.
in this case, it's white people. Um, and what they're doing is they take advantage of the normal Americans' politeness and niceness. They take advantage of that. And you feel like it's, these people clearly they feel that it's rude to tell this person that they have to like stop behaving this way. Now, to their credit, they did. Um, but I think what has to happen is as more and more Americans realize this is just a tactic of the left to shut you down and to keep you from participating in the public square in terms of your ideas. As soon as people hear that, these people have to be removed from the meeting immediately. I mean, you get one or two chances, and after that, you call the sergeant at arms, and they're out of there, right? I mean, it's it's such a horrendous. It's so hard to listen to. The other thing, and I was telling Kevin this a moment ago when I was listening to it, you can see why really competent people start staying away from public service. I mean, can you imagine having to deal with this sort of thing all day? I mean, it sounded like it was straight from the playground. Um, Name calling and you don't tell me what to say. And I mean, this is the stuff I haven't heard since sixth grade. But these are grown people saying these sorts of things. It's
Yeah.
amazing that anything gets accomplished at all. Let me stop there. But
Yeah, I mean, I've seen toddlers have more constructive input on a discussion, and on top of that, I think this is a trend we're seeing on college campuses. So that's where I think the origin of this is. They're called cry bullies. They come in and they say, "Well, you have to shut up because you're upsetting me, and you're intimidating me, and you got to shut up." And it's just like, yeah, and I think that if you look on a lot of college campuses, they demand that people shut up and that a safe space is created for them to recover from
yeah,
hearing things they don't want to hear. And in this case, this wasn't even a real debate about anything. It was
mhm,
just a guy asking a question about a piece of business that was, being discussed or had been discussed. And
mhm,
you should be able to do that in a meeting, no
yeah,
matter what. But I don't remember Robert's Rules of Order. There's not a progressive race-based version of that I recall exists. Do you? I mean, have you ever seen that? I'd like to. I bet there is a book talking about how Robert's Rules are racist.
oh, I'm
I'm
sure
sure that
there
exists.
is.
In fact, one of those college campuses probably has that, or somebody's done at least a paper on it. But
But
yeah,
yeah, at the end of the day, that's what it's almost taught. It's almost like it's inbred in them to use
yeah.
whatever race, gender thing it is as a cudgel to prevent ideas from being discussed. Because they know that whenever it comes down to ideas, they get waxed every time. Their ideas simply don't hold any water. So the way that you avoid it is you don't discuss any ideas. And a lot of them in these college environments, and I've had some discussions with a lot of these people, they're able to go through their entire college experience and into adulthood and have never heard a competing idea because they live inside the same echo chamber. They're only hearing around people who think like themselves or talk like themselves. The media supports everything they do. So you might be the very first person they ever run into who tells them something different. And it's quite, and sometimes with the ones who still have like a little space in there where they still think, it can be shocking to them and it can be quite productive because they've oftentimes never heard these things. So when you run into them, I encourage you to, to go for it in a nice professional way. I mean, still compete, go ahead and have the debate and discussion because some of them just have never heard it before.
Yeah, and I guess once they get out and experience some life, maybe some of these things will change because the world's not going to bend to their will. They've been told that they can cry bully their way through life, but that's not reality. And so unfortunately, a lot of people who are more recently out of these, I think, did you call them once communist indoctrination camps?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, once you get out of the communist indoctrination camp and you get out into real life, it takes a while. A bunch of them voted this last election cycle, and
Mhm.
that was the target that the Democrat Party aimed at, which is we need to turn these young people out who've been indoctrinated and don't have much in the way of family. Like they aren't raising families. They aren't, paying a lot of bills yet, or at least not experiencing the full brunt of what socialism does to a country or to a state, and don't have life experience, but they're willing to vote based on being told that something's really important because they were told that for years in school. Now, I think when we talk about what's really happening in our state and what people are very concerned about, one thing they're very concerned about right now is that the education system that is supposed to be preparing people for adulthood and teaching them to read and write and do math and so on, um, is probably not succeeding at that in a resounding fashion. And there's a report card that's put out by the state of Oregon. It's about itself, so it's not exactly an independent audit. But I'm going to post it here. There's an article that says, the Bend Bulletin says, troubling numbers in the statewide report card for the education system. And just to quote a few items here, because it was released last week. I didn't see it all over the news. I guess the election might have overshadowed it, but it came out after the election. That's interesting. Who'd have thought?
Right.
Guess this, yeah, I guess this was not something they wanted to have a discussion about during the time we elect people to office or not. But he said some of the data that is captured in this report card is extremely alarming. Ninth grade on track to graduate indicator. So that's freshmen in high school. Are they on track to graduate? The state goal is 95% of students hitting that target. That's the state's goal. For the 2021-2022 school year, it was about 83% of all students. Now, that's actually an improved number over what it used to be. However, once you go drill down, racial minorities were much worse, and students classified as houseless are at a 62% graduation rate, which
And then
means
when you consider that standard is probably really low already.
yes, and so and they emphasize that there's a bunch of students experiencing houselessness, which means they're probably experiencing a lot of other problems, since we know houselessness is actually associated with a lot of other issues, right? It's usually, there's a percentage of the time where that's the main issue, and then there's a percentage of the time where it's families that perhaps have people that are addicted to either have mental health issues or addicted to things like meth. And they're failing. Why aren't they talking about that instead of having a cry bully dominate a meeting? I think they should be talking about this stuff and fixing it.
Yeah, and the
not
incredible
saying it takes more money, because they've been getting more money for a long time.
Yeah, no, it's not a money problem. It's what you do with the money problem. I mean, you think about these school systems, and how much do we hear in the news? We don't hear about the three R's, right? What we hear about is things like CRT and things like that have nothing to do with what they're going to need to know when they get out into the in the job market. It's stunning. I mean, what good is it? I mean, they spend all of their energy trying to turn white kids into or black kids into racists, basically. I mean, that's what they spend their time
They
doing.
try to turn white kids into people who think that everyone's racist.
Right. Yeah. And that's what they spend their energy doing in no time on the three R's. It's rather amazing when you think about in the 60s when JFK said, hey, we're in a space race with Russia. And we were able to, in less than 10 years, catch them, put a man on the moon with that educational system.
Yeah.
We can't do anything with this educational system. I mean, it's bad.
Yeah. And so I think we've just presented a set of contrasts here: a dysfunctional entity, or at least dysfunctional members of a school board entity that's supposed to be overseeing progress and making sure that they are actually spending money wisely. And then we see a report card that says clearly they're a failure across the state, not just in one isolated area. And and yet I think we're starting to see why sometimes the schools are more about identity politics and racial politics and propaganda for various points of view, and just not enough about making sure that kids get an education.
Yeah,
Um,
I do hope, and I'm not sure if there's a move in either Oregon or Washington yet for a voucher system or some kind of a system where the dollars will follow the parents. I think it's got to have competition. I don't see them doing it on their own.
no, no, I don't. Well, shifting gears, we've been hearing for a while about the public defender crisis, and there's a lot of ways that it's being portrayed in the media that I think need to come under some scrutiny. That it's simply that there's not enough because we didn't hire enough in the first place. But it turns out that we're in a crime wave, and so we're seeing it's called and the reason why there's a public defender issue, of course, is that many of the people who they have a constitutional right, if they cannot afford legal counsel, to have it appointed on their behalf by the court. So they do have legal advice. It's a constitutional right. You can hear it when you read your Miranda rights
Mhm.
upon arrest. It's stated in those Miranda rights, and the standard for that really is what they call indigent standard. It's you simply have no means at your disposal to hire an attorney. Uh, that is not exactly how it works in Oregon. They're actually offering this to a much larger segment of people. It's almost like a lower middle class entitlement at this point,
Mhm.
maybe, especially in many cases involving children and parents and things like that. So, but we're also in the middle of a crime wave. So they try to provide it to more people. They're also getting overwhelmed with indigents, right? I mean, do you think that the folks that are coming and living in tents in Portland are setting aside funds so they can pay for legal counsel while they are out committing crimes, burglaries, and assaults and things like that, car theft, catalytic converter theft? The answer is probably no. So here's the solution that the Multnomah County District Attorney has come up with. He's decided that he's going to drop charges against nearly 300 people because of the lack of public defenders. Now, this does happen in some cases, but he's saying he's exasperated and frustrated. But this is a guy who we just talked about yesterday, is only prosecuting 46% of theft cases. 46%, as opposed to neighboring Clackamas, which is 84%, and Washington County, where we have an actual prosecutor there, 93%. So this is a guy who's saying, I'm so concerned, I have to release these people. And yet he actually was already making sure that 54% of people who committed theft weren't even getting prosecuted in the first place.
Yeah.
So this is so apparently the dropped cases include charges of low-level assaults, domestic violence, burglary, identity theft, intoxicated driving, and hit and run driving are among the charges that are being dropped. And he's going to actually release the full list of what these charges are. Apparently, it's 285 misdemeanor and felony cases have been dismissed so far, and we should really expect to see a lot more of these. Apparently, this is his answer. Even though it's his job, to find a way to make sure that we can proceed with these cases, he's raising the white flag, but I think the white flag says SOROS on it. What do you think?
Yeah, clearly the will to fight is gone. And I don't know if he ever had it in the first place. They're just not willing to enforce the law. Bottom line. Um, and these
Yeah, we don't
politicians,
really
yeah,
have much of an accountable system on this because there's hundreds
yeah,
of millions of dollars spent on this every
mhm,
biennium by the state of
yeah,
Oregon.
Mhm.
And what they do is they don't even it's not by the hour, it's by the case. So there's all kinds of issues, and sometimes we'll have maybe somebody who's a bit more expert on this come on and explain to us this. But there's
Mhm.
all kinds of problems that have been identified with this system that they're not fixing, and they're saying we just need more money. And now the Multnomah County DA's solution is just to cut people loose, send them back into the community.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, and of course, who gets hurt the worst by this? The very people who are the least position of power to deal with it, right? They go back into the lower class or the middle class communities and just destroy them. I don't know, honestly, how much more of this places like Portland can take. Um,
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think a lot of people already felt like they're at the breaking point, and of course, he's waited until after the election to do this.
mhm, that's smart.
But I think maybe uh, there might be a movement next year to bring some accountability to this DA. I think that's just my gut feeling because we have seen something very important, by the way, happen in other parts of the country. We talked last week on one of our shows that the district attorney in uh, Philadelphia,
Mhm,
his name is Larry Krasner, who has been just like Mike Schmidt and just like the guy Gascon in L.A. has
mhm,
essentially, uh, and also the city attorney in New York have just essentially decided that they're not going to prosecute a whole range of felonies and misdemeanors, or they're going to, prosecute felonies as misdemeanors whenever they can and stuff like that. And then they've seen a massive crime wave. Philadelphia has been overwhelmed with people that are uh, car carjackings. That's been happening all over the place there. Well,
yeah,
finally, this guy got some accountability. The Pennsylvania state legislature has impeached this guy. I don't know what the next steps are, but he's been
yeah.
impeached. And of course, his response is that they're just being racist. And he's white, by the way.
Yeah.
So
Hey, just whenever there's an issue, just say racist. Doesn't matter. Just racist, racist,
that
racist.
sound familiar? Yeah, I think we just talked about that with a school board that's not doing its job. Now we've got district attorneys who are not doing their jobs. And if you don't like it, you're racist. Don, you're such a racist, man.
Racist.
I
I wonder
know.
what the mechanism was for them doing that. I mean, that's actually great news because it does give a template for perhaps what could happen in other places. Because clearly Oregonians, although, for example, the governorship, did not go our way, it hasn't been that close in what, 40 years, which tells you that there's a lot of people who are getting fed up. And there are people who just don't want to move. I mean, a lot of people are moving to other states. We see it in North Clark County. There's people who are just leaving and moving to and those people who have the means to do it, but not everybody does have the means, and not everybody can do it. But but the problem is those are people with money, the very people who pay the taxes, which
Yeah,
of course makes the problem worse.
it does make it worse. And I think on top of it, it leaves behind a lot of people who basically have a hard time affording. I mean, it's going to leave people behind who don't have the means to just flee or escape whatever is happening. So therefore, the situation's likely to get worse until a major policy change happens. Now, it's fascinating that these things are occurring and that we're like the canary in the coal mine and the poster child for bad policies. And we're going to talk in a minute about another bad policy that apparently this is the experiment that's going to be tried on the state of Oregon with Measure 114. But we'll talk about that here in a minute because there is somebody who's getting fed up. Apparently, there's a Democrat state senator who is, I guess, decided that she's a little fed up now with an occurrence that happened within the last week. It's a pretrial release, which
Mhm,
means that somebody has been arrested for something, and they were the person that's been charged was put out on because of pretrial release rules, and those pretrial release rules, of course, have a state origin to them, as we know.
mhm,
It's Janine Solman. Democrat in Hillsborough, who's also a board member of the Washington County Family Justice Center.
Okay.
But apparently what happened was a gentleman by the name of Carlos Jimenez Vargas shot and killed his wife, Gabriela, and her sister, Lenine Hernandez Rosas, at a home in unincorporated Washington County before shooting himself. The court records show that Jimenez Vargas was arrested 6 weeks earlier on charges of domestic felony assault and strangulation. But that wasn't enough, I guess, to keep him detained.
You mean, did you say a week earlier?
6 weeks earlier.
6 weeks earlier for strangulation, and he's back on the streets?
That he was released, and then he went out and immediately went after his wife and her sister, and killed them. And so a double homicide in a week, and that was enough to get the attention of this Democrat, actually. And I know, yes, Democrats are people too. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is they've been constantly voting for making it harder for people to be detained, making it harder for the police to do their jobs, making it harder to prosecute people under these circumstances. And maybe because of the extreme nature of this particular crime, somebody finally woke up. And here's what she said. She said, strangulation is an intimate, personal, violent crime. Yeah. As someone who grew up in a home where domestic violence was present, I know that domestic violence is about negative and often violent control. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's also about violence, which shouldn't actually be something that gets you out of jail. And so there were several conditions associated with his release, including a no contact order for his. He's not supposed to make any contact with his family. Apparently, criminals don't follow laws and don't adhere to no contact orders. He's supposed to wear a GPS tracking device also. And he's supposed to be released into the custody of a responsible third party. Wow, this didn't work at all. That third party, do they have any liability for this? I'll bet not. Of course, who's left to sue them?
And to the lady's point, strangulation is like next level. What you said about personal, I mean,
it's attempted murder, isn't it?
Yeah. What's worse than strangulation? I mean, whether you even
I'm just strangling you. I don't want to kill you.
I mean, I can't imagine that strangulation by itself should be something that gets you years in prison. Even if you don't die.
That is gets you out of prison while awaiting trial.
Yeah, right? That is like, that's a horrendous crime, especially a man on a woman. Wow.
So court officials confirmed that it is their responsibility to monitor the GPS trackers, and they noted that no one is monitoring the GPS trackers outside normal business hours, so they won't get alerts of violations until the following day. So what we have to hope is that people that wear GPS trackers that have no contact orders will simply limit themselves to business hours to violate the contact order. That's a brilliant idea. Who came up with that?
Anybody who knows anything about criminals knows normal business hours, those are their sleeping hours. They wake up after business hours. That's when they conduct their business.
And so they say they're hiring more court officers to expand the hours they monitor GPS trackers. Okay, brilliant idea. How about not releasing people on the condition of a GPS tracker sending alerts when you're not going to actually bother to monitor most of the day? It's just, and so she was apparently, this state senator was shocked to learn about the lapse in tracking. Maybe you should be spending your time figuring those things out instead of voting for crap that makes it easier for them to release people.
That seems like there's so much negligence in this. It seems to me that, I don't know anything about the law on this stuff, but it sure seems to me that this is a case where they should be able to sue the state for negligence. I mean, their family members got murdered in a situation where clearly this person should have been locked up or tracked at minimum.
And I don't know who's left of their family to do the suing, but you don't say, hey, let's implement a policy, and then later let's figure out how to make sure it can be executed. No, you have to do it the other way around. It sounds a lot like what happened with Measure 110, right? Yeah. Let's implement Measure 110. We're going to tax cannabis sales and provide treatment, and we're going to decriminalize all these hard drugs. and then you wait almost 20 months to be able to even have the smallest amount of treatment available while it's legal for those 20 months. And then we see an exploding opioid addiction epidemic and people streaming into the state in order to be a part of it. This is like the cart before the horse, and they do it over and over and over. Now, maybe let's just applaud the fact that maybe one state senator has actually, you know, awoken to this and is planning to take some action. I know that this action, legislative action, will be quite welcome by many Republicans. I just don't know if there's enough Democrats to get behind this and make this change, because this is just the tip of the iceberg. We talk about this all the time, right? There are other instances of people, and there's a whole problem where they don't even bother tracking the data properly of pretrial releases and how many people violate the terms of those pretrial releases in Multnomah County, the biggest county in the state. That was a report a couple months ago. I think it was KATU did it. Excellent report. Don't these people watch the news, or do they just go down to Salem and vote for stuff, and then when all hell breaks loose, they're like, "Oh, that wasn't a good idea"? You know, I don't get it. I just don't get it.
Yeah, it's regime change needed in Portland. That's all I can say.
Well, this is the state, you know, and so I hope that at least some people take a message that the closeness of a lot of these elections and these races should send a message that they got to change their ways. Maybe Janine Solomon will start to change what the Democrat Party's doing, since they really control the state, of course. But okay, baby steps. Let's take what we can get. Meanwhile, I wish she would probably go out, and she and others, and do some research on Measure 114 and what it's going to do, because Measure 114, people are starting to realize, like, December 8th is what I'm told now will actually be the implementation date, except that it's impossible to implement. And I'm pretty sure that the lawsuits that are being filed will result in injunctions, and they have no ability administratively to implement this. So sheriffs all across the state are saying, no, we're not going to enforce this. It's just impossible. But it will have this effect. It will have the effect of making it very difficult to purchase a firearm, and therefore effectively suspending your Second Amendment right if you do not own a firearm already. And so this article, KTVL article, goes into how it's going to affect gun stores in particular. It says for most small gun stores, it means they're going to go out of business. That's going to happen very quickly. Generally, it's 3 to 6 months if we can't run checks. Most local businesses don't have the available free cash to float their operations for that long. So it really has to do with the fact that they're going to be overwhelmed with background checks that then require a permit to be issued and a training course. And so it's going to diminish the ability to purchase firearms or sell firearms, that there won't be a place to purchase them. And he says their business typically brings in $2 million a year, these small gun stores, which equates to upwards of $1 million in sales not taking place if state agencies take a full 6 months to plan and implement the new permitting process, which I've actually heard 6 months is an extremely optimistic timeline. I've been hearing that they actually probably can't get the full thing set up until 2024. Now, there's been a spike in gun sales in the last 2 weeks. Massive spike, people rushing to get in there, and then many of them are going to be waiting for their background checks to be processed under the current system. And so there's a major backlog we talked about the other day. There's around 20,000 pending checks. It's gotten now, as of November 17th, is up to 24,274. I think it was 12,000 a couple weeks earlier, and before that it was like 2,000, 3,000. So it's quadrupled and doubled, and we aren't even to the deadline yet, where people really begin to realize that this mess is coming. But it is going to drive out of business many of these gun retailers, and I think that was the goal of this.
That is exactly the goal. And within luck, although all of this will take time, this stuff will wind its way to the judicial system and this whole law will be overturned. It's really a bright spot that the sheriffs are saying, nope, we're not going to enforce it. I mean, that's great. But these gun stores are left high and dry. So it's just another case of Democratic Party attacking small business. Besides trampling on, our Second Amendment rights. And the other side of this is, I think someone commented on this, is just going to turn the rest of us into criminals because people are going to get their guns, right? You can get them through a store and do it the legal way, or you can get them on the street like criminals get them.
Well, and actually, it's criminals who, because I think when you talk about the ripple effect, the effect that Measure 114 is going to have on businesses and gun owners, who it's not going to affect? Criminals, because criminals don't follow laws and they will still go and purchase illegal firearms because that's what they do. They commit crimes and they don't care about the law. So this is just it's going to affect law-abiding businesses and gun owners.
Heck, it probably helps. Yeah. It might even help the illegal people because they can sell their guns to the legal owners now.
Yeah, it'll expand the black market for illegal guns. Yeah, good job. Way
Exactly
to go.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, this is going to be an ongoing story, and as the days and hours count down to when this goes live, I think we're going to be watching to see what happens with this. But I think when you take the stories we just talked about, where the Multnomah County DA is releasing felons and people guilty of what they consider low-level crimes out onto the streets, while it becomes harder for people who are being affected by these crimes to purchase a firearm to defend themselves. And then we have police and sheriffs who do not have the resources to respond to this crime wave. And then we've got people who are even being arrested and released on pretrial release, going out and committing more crimes. There's only one thing that, other than, of course, detaining that gentleman who committed the double homicide suicide in Hillsborough. Those two ladies, actually, if they had been armed, maybe this just doesn't happen. That's it, because they were let down by the entire rest of the system. And that's the system that I think we're all beginning to wonder whether we have a justice system that we can count on. Certainly, do we have public safety, or has it been reimagined totally out of existence for too many people that now confidence in that system is going to collapse? I want to remain optimistic, but I also think that the issues being clarified, we didn't make enough progress in this election to change course entirely. But if one Democrat wakes up and starts to realize it's time, okay.
Yeah. Well, it's terrible to say this, but maybe there just hasn't been enough pain. I don't know. I mean, I'm also of the opinion that these elections aren't exactly clean either. I mean, I know that's another whole topic. I think they built in cheating into the system with all this mail-in ballot shenanigans. But having said that, maybe it just hasn't been painful enough for these people. The other thing we have to recognize too is we have a massive media campaign against everything we're talking about here tonight. In a normal situation, quote unquote, like what we had, say, 30 or 40 years ago, there's no way that this could have happened because the media would have been relatively. It's always been a little bit to the left, but it never would have been like it is now. So, these people aren't getting the message. This is one of the things we forget. These people aren't getting any kind of balanced message. It's
That's
amazing.
They're in the dark, right?
Yeah,
They're in the dark. They're in a silo of
yeah.
information. They're being spoon-fed information that is frankly not reflective of the true state of circumstances. So the only thing can break through that is reality. And that's what you're talking about. That's the pain of these bad policies. Is the only thing that's actually got a chance of reversing this, because people, I mean, I'm surprised some of this is even being reported by the media, but we're posting all these stories so you can go and look at them yourself and take it in, because we're just sort of a table of contents to reality here. That's what we are on this show. And there's not enough people doing what we're doing, but we're going to keep doing it. Why don't we just wrap up here with a final look at the justice system and how, if they can do it to a former president of the United States, they can pretty much do it to anybody. So as we know, President Trump, who's announced he's running for re-election, the Attorney General has appointed a special prosecutor to oversee. And I don't know why that wasn't done from the outset, but they were busy trying to make it appear that he's criminal and stuff, all the way up until the point when the election occurred. And then right after that, uh, the attorney general decided to appoint a special prosecutor because he suddenly realized that there's a conflict of interest in the midst of a presidential election year, to be pursuing this. And so they've got a guy named Jack Smith, who is he's the former chief of the Department of Justice Public Integrity Section. And but unfortunately, his appointment and his background, he's taking over 2 investigations of Trump, but he's marred by controversy as he begins to take on this role already, right? And so he was named to oversee these 2 cases, but at the same time, he's the guy who was involved with the previous scandal where, if you remember the IRS scandal, when the IRS was basically making it so they weren't approving people that were from conservative nonprofits that were trying to apply for nonprofit tax treatment status. And they were doing it based on the political leanings of these groups. And it happened during the Obama administration. And so the House Oversight Committee back then, which was controlled by Republicans at that time, concluded that this guy, Mr. Jack Smith, during his earlier stint at the DOJ, he set up a critical meeting between his department and IRS official Lois Lerner to set in motion the targeting of these groups. So he was a facilitator of something that was entirely illegal. And so what are we going to get from a guy who's now in charge of this? Well, it doesn't end there. Not only did he set up that meeting to facilitate that, but also, he's had the Supreme Court actually reverse a case that he was the prosecutor. He prosecuted Virginia Governor Bob McDonnell on 11 felony counts alleging that he accepted the GOP governor accepted his family accepted gifts in return for official public acts. And he prosecuted that whole case. And then it was appealed all the way to the Supreme Court, and it was completely thrown out because of how he decided to interpret the laws regarding bribery at the federal level, because this was not done in the state of Virginia, and that they exceeded the definition of the bribery statutes. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote, "There is no doubt this case is distasteful. It may be worse than that, but our concern is not with the tawdry tales of Ferraris, Rolexes, and ball gowns. It is instead the broader legal implications of the government's boundless interpretation of the federal bribery statute. A more limited interpretation of the term official act leaves ample room for prosecuting corruption, while comporting with the text of the statute and the precedent of the court. The judgment of the Court of Appeals is vacated and the case is remanded on further proceedings consistent with this opinion." In other words, they said that this guy that's going to be overseeing the interpretation of statutes that he's going to try to apply to President Trump and others connected with these cases, such as the Mar-a-Lago raid, this guy who overinterpreted that statute is now going to be in charge of interpreting these statutes. What could go wrong with that? What wrong could be achieved? And I think that is actually, I guess do the Democrats are they completely unable to find a straight shooter who is not already mired in some sort of political gamesmanship controversy when they were supposed to be following the law and being blind to the politics of the people involved? Why can't they find anybody like that? Why is that so hard? There's certainly more Democrat lawyers than there are Republicans, by far.
It appears that it just run them all out of the party.
Well, I guess.
Yeah.
Now, there's further news here, because they think this actually will backfire on this, what's happened with the special prosecutor. They think it'll backfire on the Democrats in a couple of different ways. And John Solomon with Just the News, um, um, actually talked with Bill O'Reilly about this, the former longtime anchor of the O'Reilly Factor. Um, and he said, I think that this is actually a drastic mistake. Uh, in order for Jack Smith to investigate what Trump did or did not do on January 6th, he has to get into the FBI and what the FBI did and did not do. He
Mhm.
has to. He can't bury that. And I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
Discovery will find out what the FBI was doing and not doing that day. And this
Mhm.
is not some crazy person. This is Bill O'Reilly, who tends to
Mhm.
shoot down conspiracy theories, not talk about what might have happened. And I think, um, and Bill O'Reilly said, and there's no doubt, there were at least 8 FBI agents embedded in the most virulent protesters that day. That's the New York Times that reported that. They
Yeah.
were there. The FBI was there. And he goes, well, what the deuce were they doing? And we don't know that yet. And yet, I think this is what's going to happen: is they're going to have to get into that. And if they try to bury that, it'll completely uh, mar this investigation and make it really appear completely illegitimate.
Well, I tell you, I don't know how they can suppress, although they've been pretty amazing, how much longer they can suppress that, all that. I just don't. Um, Time will tell.
And Christopher Wray is getting some scrutiny. He's going to get a lot more scrutiny. He's the FBI
Mhm.
director, and he just he dodged answering any questions. Just denied that there was anything untoward, any wrongdoing
Mm.
by any of the FBI agents embedded that day. But then he won't provide any specifics, none, to
Mhm.
Congress.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to see this proceed. Now, unfortunately, the Supreme Court has allowed the House Democrats, the House Ways and Means Committee, to have access to former President Trump's tax records in the waning months of their control of that chamber. And uh, this is also of great concern because uh, I think that this is them on the way out the door, getting ready to take something that they're not gonna deal with it in the legitimate manner that they should. What they're gonna do is they're gonna take it and then leak it selectively to the media in order to for political ends.
Yeah.
Any reason to doubt that after what we saw the Russia hoax investigation?
Well, everything they do is political. We know that.
And
So,
everything gets leaked, even if they
yeah,
say it won't be, right?
right. Yeah. Yeah.
And selectively so.
Mhm.
So I think this is uh, uh, they know the Republicans are expected to withdraw the request when they take the House back. But now that the Supreme Court's ruled, apparently that unblocks the tax records, and this committee is just going to go and try to utilize that. Um, and they don't really have any business getting involved with the presidential election at all. They don't, right?
Yeah.
So I'm concerned. I know you're concerned about our justice system. I'm concerned about how its politics have overwhelmed it and maybe brought it to its knees and
Mhm.
devastated the confidence people have in it. That's been the theme today, hasn't it?
Mhm.
Pretty much the whole
Yeah.
day.
Yeah. It really has. I mean, I'm sure if you look at surveys and studies across the board, they're going to show people have lost faith in the system. Whether it be Congress, whether it be judicial system, pretty much all those systems, and for good reason. I mean, you look around yourself, you see out of control crime. You don't see enough police. The schools are terrible. You see CRT and race hate promoted in schools. It's pretty bad. Now, having said all of that, though, there are, and I know we're getting close to the end. And we always end on a positive note. There are a lot of positive things headed the right direction. I mean, people are waking up to it. People are seeing it, and people are responding to it, and that's good. I mean, it's probably good that all this stuff came to a head now because if people hadn't wakened up, if they hadn't been and Trump forced them to expose their hand, can you
Yeah.
imagine how much more damage they could have done if we're sitting here without a Trump presidency that ever happened? Um, One can only imagine what we'd be looking at right now. So, yeah,
Yep. And I think that the new House majority, the Republican majority, really does have to make a priority of draining the swamp. Otherwise, they will be ineffective too. They have to use their power to
mhm,
go after, expose, make the sunlight disinfectant start to take effect, and root out all of this corruption and politicization and woke garbage that is taking over these institutions. You and I obviously are also both concerned about what it's doing to our military, which one day might have to fight a war. And we might only know critical race theory and not combat tactics because that's all they've focused on.
Yeah.
And they may not have the equipment they need to actually win a war. And losing a war is pretty serious. So, but this is a battle on many fronts. And I agree that people are starting to wake up. They got to do more, and they will. I believe that. You too, right?
I'm pretty confident. I mean, obviously I'm disappointed we had to go through this, but at the same time, it was probably a necessary thing because too many of us had our heads in the ground and not paying attention. Well, now we're awake and we need to respond. And I think Americans are responding, and so that's the good news.
We got to keep doing it. We just because there's been an election, we made some progress. I think we should hunger for more, and we need to achieve more. We need to keep fighting the good fight all the way, and keep working to persuade people. And everybody, please keep sharing the show with everyone you can. We need more people watching it because we're sharing stuff here that they won't hear anywhere else in Oregon, and we're doing it nearly on a daily basis. It's a service to you, and I am very lucky today to have this great American, Don Anderson, with me to talk about all this. Don, thank you for joining me here for the captive audience on Wednesday. And we will, and by the way, happy Thanksgiving to you and happy Thanksgiving to everyone out there. This is when we realize just how great a country we have and why we're thankful for so many things that we have and we experience. Might remind us why we need to get back to work as soon as Thanksgiving's over and do what we got to do going forward.
Absolutely. Thank you as well. Happy Thanksgiving, and everybody have a great holiday.
We'll see you on Friday. It should be David and Sunny joining us on Friday's captive audience. And again, enjoy the feast and your families. And we'll see you on Friday. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.